Centralia, Pennsylvania. Almost everyone is gone. The ground keeps burning, but no one can explain why the fire never stops. They say it started in 1962, on a dry summer afternoon, when the town council tried to clean up the local landfill. They set it on fire, just like they'd done every year, but this time the flames didn't die out. Beneath that quiet, forgotten town, an old network of abandoned coal mines had dried up and turned hollow. The fire slipped through cracks in the rock and spread like veins catching flame, black blood moving through the bones of something long dead. Officials downplayed it. The first cracks in the roads were chalked up to shifting ground. The smoke rising from the basements? A curious side effect, they said, but no one mentioned the scream. 3 days after the fire began, a man on the borough council was heard yelling in the middle of the night, running down Locust Avenue barefoot, pajamas torn, shouting that there were eyes in the fire. 3 weeks later, he vanished. Official reports say Centralia was evacuated due to public safety risks. Collapsing ground, toxic gases, extreme heat. But those who lived there between 1962 and 1984 remember it differently. Voices, knocks from under the floorboards, and a smell that wasn't just sulfur. It was burnt skin. There are records that were never published, journals found in basements of houses now swallowed by earth, tape recordings recovered from mine shafts sealed with concrete, letters from residents who warned of things that rose with the smoke, accounts that were silenced, forgotten, buried. And one question that's echoed for decades: what was awakened beneath Centralia when the flames began? Because some believe the fire wasn't an accident. It was a desperate, failed attempt to shut something in, to seal a presence, to keep it from rising. But the fire failed. And now the thing that was awakened waits, patiently, because every town has a heart, and the heart of Centralia still beats, beneath ash, beneath smoke, beneath lies. She stepped out of the car, and the heat hit her like a furnace. Not just heat, pressure, like the air was too thick, pressing against her skin with invisible hands. The ground beneath her boots felt soft, like it was tired of being solid. Steam hissed from a crack near the curb. It curled through the weeds like breath, and the trees around the empty road leaned inward, silent, brittle, almost listening. This wasn't how Marjorie remembered Centralia. She had only been a child when her family fled the town in the early 80s. Her memories were foggy, tangled with dreams and fire alarms and that constant humming that lived beneath the floorboards. But she remembered the house. The last house on Locust Avenue. It wasn't supposed to be here anymore. Her aunt had died in 1984. The house had been condemned, same as the others, swallowed by the state, boarded shut, marked with bright orange X's. But now the house stood there like it had never left, not crumbling, not faded, intact, waiting. Marjorie stepped over the cracked curb and walked toward the porch. Her fingers twitched. She hadn't planned to come back here, not really. It was supposed to be a drive-through, a personal ghost tour. But something pulled her. The closer she got to Centralia, the worse the dreams had become. The old hallway with peeling yellow wallpaper. The sound of footsteps upstairs when no one lived above them. The cold hand on her back while she slept. She'd told herself it was just memory. Trauma. But memories don't call your name. Not like the voice that had whispered to her 3 nights ago. You left the door open. She paused on the bottom step. The wood didn't creak. It should have. The whole house should have sagged with time and rot. But it looked untouched, like someone had just stepped out for groceries. She reached for the doorknob. It was cold. For a second, she saw herself reflected in the glass pane, her face pale, her eyes too wide, her hair damp from the humidity rising out of the earth. Behind her, the street was still empty. No birds, no cars, no wind. Marjorie opened the door. The smell hit her first. Old smoke and wet wood, like someone had tried to clean up after a fire that never fully went out. The wallpaper was still yellow. The couch was still green. Her aunt's crucifix still hung above the hallway mirror, tilted just slightly. Every detail was right and wrong. In the kitchen, the faucet was dripping. In the living room, the TV was off but humming, like it was waiting to be turned on. She stepped into the hallway, her boots leaving faint impressions in the dust. Too faint, as if the floor didn't want to remember her. She passed the basement door. It was open. Her aunt had always kept it locked. She used to say that the cold comes up from there even in July. But now the door yawned wide like a mouth, and Marjorie could see the stairs descending into shadow, where no light reached, where even sound seemed to flatten. She turned away. "You left the door open." The voice wasn't in her head this time. It came from upstairs. Marjorie froze. The air upstairs was heavier, thick with the kind of stillness that only exists in places where time forgets to move. Her breath caught in her throat, but her feet moved on their own. Step by step, she climbed the staircase. The carpet was the same scratchy blue from her childhood. But there were no dents where the furniture used to sit, no dust, no cobwebs, just clean, empty space. And that whisper again. "You left the door open." The voice didn't sound angry. It sounded disappointed, like something ancient trying to remember how to feel. She reached the top of the stairs. The hallway stretched longer than she remembered. Too long. There were 4 doors. There used to be 3. The 4th door was at the very end, painted black, no doorknob. She looked left, then right. Her old bedroom was exactly as it had been. Peach wallpaper, crooked lamp, books still stacked on the floor, except there were drawings taped to the wall. She stepped inside. Her fingers trembled. The drawings weren't hers. They were childlike, frantic, done in black crayon. Each one showed the same shape, a wide circle with no face, just a line where the mouth should be. The same figure repeated over and over in different scenes, standing in the basement, watching through the kitchen window, crouched on the ceiling of her room, and at the bottom of each page, in shaky handwriting, "It's still hungry." A sudden crash came from the hallway. Marjorie spun around, heart racing. The 4th door, the black one, was open. But there was no hinge, no handle. It had just opened, like a wound. Darkness spilled from it, not absence of light, but something thicker, like the air itself was sick. She took a step back. Her skin prickled. "You left the door open." The voice whispered again, this time closer, behind her ear. She turned too fast and saw her reflection in the bedroom mirror. Except it wasn't her. It wore her face, her clothes, her fear. But the eyes were wrong. They were empty, as if whatever lived behind them had never been human. Marjorie stumbled back from the mirror, her heel catching the edge of the rug. She didn't fall. Something caught her, not gently. It felt like hands, but colder, larger, too many fingers. She pulled free and bolted for the hallway, her pulse hammering in her ears. The air smelled like ash now, burnt paper, and somewhere beneath it all, something sweeter, rotting. She ran past the black door. Inside, she could hear breathing. Not hers, not human. The hallway behind her stretched farther than it should. The stairs were gone. No, not gone. They had moved. The house was shifting, breathing, every wall pulsing with memory, with hunger. She shouted, but the sound went nowhere. It felt like screaming underwater. She reached for a window, locked. She grabbed a chair and threw it, but when it hit the glass, the sound it made wasn't right. Not a shatter, not a crack, just a dull, wet thud, like hitting skin. Marjorie turned and ran again, into the hallway, into the next door, into anything that might still be real. And then she saw it. In the center of the floor, a trapdoor. It hadn't been there before, but it pulsed, like it was breathing, waiting. Etched around it, drawn in thick coal or dried blood, was the same symbol from the crayon drawings, a mouthless face, a circle, and below it, in fresh black ink, "You opened it." She didn't remember opening it. But she was already halfway down the stairs, not by choice. Her legs moved like they didn't belong to her. The air grew colder, wet, heavy with smoke. Each step creaked beneath her weight, but not like old wood. It sounded like bone. At the bottom of the stairs, the ground glowed, red, flickering. She stepped forward. The earth was breathing now, and then, finally, she saw it. In the center of the burning cavern beneath the house, there was a figure, tall, thin, its skin blackened like coal cracked open by heat. It turned to face her. It had no eyes, no mouth, but she felt it smile. "You left the door open," it said one last time. "Now, you'll stay." Darkness didn't fall. It rose. Like water climbing a stairwell, it swallowed the air behind her. The tunnel sealed itself shut brick by brick until there was no light left, only the heat and the breathing. Not hers, not human. The creature, if it could even be called that, stood without moving, yet somehow it shifted. Its form rippled like a shadow inside smoke. Where its face should have been, the skin stretched smooth, mouthless, featureless, except for two deep vertical lines down its head, like the seams of something stitched shut. Marjorie tried to speak, but the words shriveled in her throat. It didn't need language. She felt its meaning, directly, like memory poured into her skull. This was never your house. She stumbled back, her boots crunching something soft. She didn't look down. The floor pulsed beneath her, a mixture of rock, ash, and something organic like cartilage. A heartbeat echoed from the walls. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. It was coming from below. She turned to run, but where the staircase had been, there was only black stone, smooth, seamless, like the house had never been real at all, like she had never left. Something was wrong with her hands. She looked down. Her fingers were smeared with coal dust, but beneath the dust the skin was changing, thinning, cracking, like paper left in flame too long. Marjorie's breath came in short, shallow gasps. She rubbed at her fingers, desperate to wipe the strange film away. But it wasn't dust. It was peeling. Her skin flaked like dry paint, revealing something darker beneath. Not blood, not flesh. Something black, shiny, like obsidian or burned glass. "No," she whispered. She backed against the stone wall, her eyes darting toward the thing still standing in the center of the chamber. It hadn't moved, but the air around it twisted, heat mirage, smoke, and something else, like the edges of reality buckling under pressure. It didn't chase her. It didn't have to. This place, it was alive, and it knew her. This was never your house. You were born of fire. You returned because you belong. The voice wasn't coming from the creature anymore. It came from the walls, from the floor, from beneath her skin. Suddenly the chamber trembled, stone cracked behind her. A seam split in the rock like a mouth opening sideways, and a thick wave of heat burst out, hot enough to blister her lips, and through that opening she heard it. Voices, many hundreds, maybe thousands, all whispering at once. Some cried, some laughed. One sounded like her mother, calling her name in reverse. And above them all, a single voice echoed, "Come home." She turned and ran. Blind, barefoot now, her boots left somewhere behind her. The heat had melted the rubber soles into the floor. The tunnel twisted in directions that made no sense. Stairs led upward but never rose. Hallways looped into themselves. Her own shadow moved differently, lagging, twitching, sometimes crawling ahead of her like it no longer belonged to her shape. She passed a door in the wall, then another, all identical, steel frames, round windows, rusted bolts sealing them shut. On the third one she stopped. This door had her name on it, scratched into the metal in something that dripped like ink or blood or both. She pressed her hand to it. It was cold, the only cold thing she'd touched since coming back to Centralia. Her hand lingered on the door. The metal felt too smooth, too new. And beneath her palm, the letters of her name throbbed with heat, like they knew her. She didn't want to open it, but her fingers curled around the handle anyway. It turned without resistance. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a room, not a chamber, not a tunnel. A real, rectangular room, like something torn out of an apartment and buried miles below the earth. The walls were painted soft pink. There was a lamp in the corner, a twin bed, a closet with mirrored doors, her childhood bedroom. Perfect, preserved. Even the stuffed rabbit was on the pillow, the one she'd lost when she was 7. Its left ear was still torn. She stepped inside. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the noise behind her stopped. No more breathing, no more whispers, only silence. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. She didn't understand. Was it a trick, a memory, a trap? She turned toward the closet mirrors and froze. Her reflection was smiling. She wasn't. The thing in the mirror tilted its head, still wearing her face, still dressed in her clothes, but its eyes were too wide, its mouth too still, and the smile stretched just a little too far. Then it moved, not in sync, not delayed. It stepped forward, out of the mirror. Glass cracked, the surface shimmered like water. Marjorie backed away, but her body wouldn't obey. She watched in paralyzed horror as the reflection reached through the glass. It didn't step out, it pulled her in. The mirror swallowed her like water, cold, silent, instant. She gasped, only to find herself standing on the other side, looking out through the glass. The room was the same, but it was reversed and darker, like the light had been drained out of everything. Behind her, the hallway didn't lead back into the tunnels. It opened into a street, Locust Avenue, exactly as it had been in 1983. Children played with jump ropes. Lawnmowers buzzed. A mailman walked by, whistling an old Springsteen song. The town was whole, alive. She stepped outside. No one looked at her. She shouted. No one heard. She walked past her neighbor's house. Old Mr. Jenkins waved at the air beside her. She wasn't there. Not really. She was a ghost. And in the center of the street, where the old mine vent had split the pavement 30 years ago, there was no crack, no fire, just a child, crouched in the middle of the road, drawing on the asphalt with black chalk, a familiar shape, a circle with no mouth. Marjorie approached the child slowly. Her footsteps made no sound. The world around her felt muted, like watching an old VHS through thick glass. The child kept drawing, again and again, the same symbol, a head, no mouth, wide black eyes. But this time, there was something new. He added teeth, dozens of them, lining the inside of the circle, like a trap that never stops closing. Marjorie crouched next to him. "Hey," she whispered, unsure if he could even hear her. "Who are you?" The boy looked up. His face. She knew that face. She'd seen it in family photo albums. Her uncle, lost in the mines in 1962. Age 8, presumed dead, never recovered. His skin was pale, eyes too hollow, lips trembling, but he smiled. "You shouldn't have opened the door," he said. "Why?" she whispered. He leaned closer, and as he did, the asphalt beneath him cracked, not from heat, but from pressure. "Because it was never supposed to open from this side." The ground began to tremble. Locust Avenue rippled like a reflection in disturbed water. The houses flickered. Children froze mid-run. The sun overhead dimmed, its light bending, twisting, as if pulled toward something beneath the surface. Marjorie turned. At the end of the street, the coal breaker tower loomed, old, skeletal, long demolished in the real world. But here it stood tall and breathing. Smoke curled from its broken windows like fingers. A sound, low and inhuman, rolled from its foundation, part growl, part song. Something was coming through. Marjorie ran. She darted past memories wearing human faces, neighbors, relatives, versions of herself. None moved, none blinked. They were echoes, preserved moments. And now, they were watching. She reached the mirror again, her bedroom, still waiting. She slammed her hands against the glass. "Let me out!" she screamed. From inside, her reflection stood motionless, still smiling, still wearing her face. Then it lifted its hand, one finger to its lips. "Shh," it whispered. "It's listening." Behind her, the town began to collapse. The sky ripped open, revealing flame, not above but beneath. Everything inverted. The street fell inward. Buildings peeled away like paper burned from the edges. The boy on the asphalt vanished in a flash of red light. And Marjorie, she fell. She woke, gasping, covered in soot, back in her car, in the woods outside Centralia. The engine was off, the keys in her lap. The road ahead, empty. For a moment, she thought maybe it had all been a hallucination, until she looked at the passenger seat. Lying there perfectly folded was a child's drawing, black crayon on white paper, a circle, no mouth, lined with teeth. The drawing didn't move, but it changed her. Marjorie stared at it, her fingers trembling, black dust flaking from her nails. The paper felt too warm, like it had just come from a child's hand, even though there were no children left in Centralia, not for decades. She opened the door slowly. The air outside smelled like rot and rust. Not quite smoke, not quite sulfur, a smell that belonged to something ancient, something that had lived too long beneath. The forest was too quiet, not dead exactly, but listening. She stepped out, clutching the drawing like a fragile truth. Behind her, the car door slammed shut on its own. She didn't flinch. The old road into town was barely visible now. Grass had cracked through the asphalt, pushing the past upward like bone through skin. Her boots crunched broken glass and dried moss. Marjorie wasn't sure how long she walked. Time stretched in strange directions here. The sun never moved. Her shadow followed her wrong, angled too sharp, flickering when it shouldn't. And then she saw it. The church, St. Ignatius, or what was left of it. The frame still stood, blackened by time and smoke, but the stained glass windows were all gone. Except one. High above the arched doorway, a single piece of glass remained. A circular pane, once the face of a saint, now melted into a toothless scream. She hesitated. Last time she saw this place, it was her grandfather's funeral. That was before the fire, before the town split open, before the ground started to breathe. Inside, the church was hollow, no pews, no altar, only soot and silence. She stepped inside. The temperature dropped. Her breath steamed in the air. And then, a sound. Not a voice. Not quite. It was like hearing someone whisper underwater, too deep to understand, but too loud to ignore. "She has come back." It echoed through the rafters, vibrating the stone. And then, a figure moved in the far end of the nave, tall, thin, dressed in black. Its face was obscured, as if the air around it bent to avoid the truth of what it was, but it wasn't the faceless creature from the tunnel. This one was older, hungrier. It lifted its hand, and in that moment, the stained glass window screamed. The sound split the air, shrill and impossible. Marjorie fell to her knees, clutching her ears, blood trickling from her nose. When she looked up, the figure was gone. But something had been left behind, where it stood. A single matchbox, dusty red with gold lettering. She picked it up. The cover read, "Return what was taken." The matchbox was too heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. Marjorie turned it in her fingers, half expecting it to be empty. But when she slid it open, there was only one match inside, black-tipped, unburned, and beneath it, etched into the cardboard in tiny, frantic handwriting, "Don't light it here." She pocketed the matchbox without knowing why. Some part of her, the part that had walked barefoot through the tunnels, that had stood on a street that shouldn't exist, understood. This wasn't just a tool, it was a key. And keys only work in the right doors. She left the church in silence. As she stepped outside, the wind picked up. Ash swept across the grass like snow in reverse, falling upward, drawn toward a point far ahead in the distance. And there, rising like a wound in the land, was the burn pit. She hadn't planned to come here. No one did. The pit was where the first vent opened in 1962, where the fire was supposed to start. But what burned wasn't coal. Not only. Locals told stories. They always had. That something went missing down there. Something the town never acknowledged. Not just miners. Something older. She didn't remember walking toward it. She was just there. The pit was deeper than she remembered. It had collapsed inward over the years, pulling dirt, stone, memories, entire buildings into itself. Now it gaped like a mouth with no tongue. And as Marjorie looked down, she felt it again. A heartbeat, not hers, not human, coming from deep beneath the earth. Steady, ancient, waiting. She stood on the edge, and then the earth spoke. No sound, but she heard it, behind her eyes, in the roots of her teeth. "You brought the flame. Return what you took, or be taken." Something moved in the depths. A glow, far below, began to rise, orange, flickering, but not fire. Something slower, thicker, like molten shadow climbing toward her. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the matchbox. Her hand shook. Whatever lived down there, it knew the match. It remembered it. She slid it open. The black-tipped match pulsed with warmth, but she hesitated, because this time she felt something else. A presence behind her, not malicious, not monstrous, familiar. She turned and saw herself, not the reflection from the mirror, not the thing with the wrong smile. This was her, but younger, 12, maybe 13. The age she was when her parents finally fled Centralia. The age when she stopped sleeping. The age she first drew the circle with no mouth. The younger Marjorie looked at her, eyes hollow, voice flat. "We lit it before. We broke it open. Now it wants us back." The younger Marjorie stepped closer. She was barefoot, dressed in the same clothes from that day in 1994. The day she and 2 others snuck into the old shaft behind the town cemetery. A dare. That's what they told themselves. But even then, they felt it. Something pulsing under the rocks. A warmth that had no source. A presence. The older Marjorie reached out, but her younger self flinched away. "You shouldn't be here," the girl whispered. "You were supposed to forget." Marjorie swallowed. "I did forget. Until now." The girl shook her head. "No, you remembered. That's why the fire started again." Marjorie blinked. "What fire?" The girl's eyes darkened. It was never just fire. The earth trembled beneath them. Not violently, but rhythmically, as if something below was shifting, breathing, rising. Marjorie clutched the match tighter. "What did we do?" she asked. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward the pit, and suddenly Marjorie remembered, not in flashes, not in nightmares, but in clarity. 3 kids, a stolen book, a chalk circle drawn on the floor of the mine, deep underground where no adults ever went. They thought it was a game, but it wasn't a game. It was a calling. They lit a match, said the name, wrote the symbol, and something woke up. One of them, Ryan, started bleeding from his ears. The other, Ellie, screamed until her throat tore open. Marjorie ran. She never spoke of it. No one did. The mine sealed itself days later, and then the fires began. Not in the coal, but beneath it. Something had been invited, and it stayed. Now, at the edge of the pit, with her younger self watching, Marjorie held the match over the hole. It pulsed in her hand, eager to burn. "Return what was taken," the voice echoed again. And now she understood. It wasn't asking for a thing. It was asking for a person, a life, a memory, a piece of what was once human, her. The girl reached out. "Don't light it, not yet." "Why?" "Because once it burns, it opens the gate again." Marjorie looked down. The glow from below was closer now, not light, not flame, but eyes. Watching. Thousands of them, layered like scales, blinking in unison. She clutched the match. "What happens if I don't?" The girl didn't answer, because she was gone, vanished, as if she'd never been there at all. Only the wind remained, and the match, waiting. The silence at the pit's edge was not empty. It was filled with listening. Marjorie stood there, staring into the hollow depth where light refused to stay, where memory and matter were the same thing. The match in her hand grew heavier, as if time itself had soaked into the wood. Above her, the sky had changed. No longer blue, no longer grey. It was cracked, like glass, held together by willpower alone. She looked down at the pit one last time. She didn't want to remember. But it wasn't about her anymore. It was about what she left behind. She struck the match, a flash, brief, silent. The flame wasn't orange. It was blue, cold, electric, flickering like thought. And then it fell, not into the pit, but into her. Marjorie gasped as the fire entered her chest. She didn't burn. She remembered, all of it, the tunnel, the words, the name that was never meant to be spoken aloud. The voice that came after the voice, a being that existed beneath belief, that was not worshipped but fed, by fear, by memory, by the repetition of a shape, a circle, no mouth, endless teeth. It hadn't been awoken, it had been summoned, by them, by her. And now, after years of burning in the dark, it was ready. The pit lit up, not with flame, but with forms, bodies, walking, climbing, thousands of them, all carrying the same face. Her uncle, Ryan, Ellie, her younger self, echoes walking backward out of the pit and into the world above. Not alive, not dead, not entirely separate from her. Each of them carried the mark. Each of them carried part of it. And Marjorie carried the rest. She collapsed. When she awoke, the sun had returned. The pit was quiet, empty, as if nothing had ever happened. The matchbox lay beside her, scorched and blank. No writing, no match. Just a single circle drawn on the inside flap. She staggered back to the road. There were no cars, no signs of people, only footprints. Dozens of them, small, barefoot, leading out of town, all heading in the same direction. She followed, because she understood now. The fire in Centralia had never been about coal. It had never been about accidents. It was a beacon, a prison, yes, but also an invitation. And someone, somewhere, had finally accepted. Marjorie walked without thinking. Her feet followed the path of the barefoot prints that led away from the pit, across the cracked asphalt, over sun-bleached weeds, through a neighborhood that shouldn't have existed anymore. Houses half swallowed by vines and ash leaned inward, like they were listening to her footsteps. Street signs twisted in impossible directions. A mailbox burned quietly with no fire inside it. Each step pulled her further from the Centralia she once knew, and deeper into something else, a version of the town that had never been mapped, never built, yet always existed beneath the one people remembered. The footprints led toward the woodline. She hadn't planned to follow them, but her body had decided, and her shadow, strangely elongated and independent, had begun to walk slightly ahead of her, instead of behind. The trees were too tall, not like Pennsylvania trees, taller, thinner, hollow, and the deeper she walked, the more the air changed, not in smell but in memory. She began to hear things, not around her, inside her. This was the first place we touched the skin of the world. Here, before the church, before the fire, we came through. The voice was hers, but not. It sounded like her bones were speaking. Eventually, she found them. The ones who had walked out of the pit. They stood in a clearing where no clearing should have existed. The trees parted in perfect symmetry, forming a circle in the forest floor, too round to be natural, too clean to be human-made. They stood still, a dozen, 100. Some were children. Some wore the faces of the long dead. Others wore no faces at all. And at the center of them stood a man in a miner's uniform, completely unburned, his badge reading Thomas Greaves, 1962. Marjorie's throat tightened. Her grandfather, dead for 30 years. He looked at her with black, glassy eyes, not malevolent, not blank, but full, like something was wearing him from the inside. He raised a hand slowly, pointing to the center of the clearing. There lay a spiral of bones, neatly arranged, smoking gently as if freshly unearthed from fire. "Do you know what this place is?" he asked, his voice echoing with layers that didn't belong to him. She couldn't answer. Not out loud. This is where it began. Long before the mines, before the town, before the people who thought they discovered this land. The air thickened. This ground was never empty. It was waiting. Marjorie stepped forward, compelled. The others didn't move. They just watched, silent, breathing in rhythm, like one organism in 1,000 bodies. As she reached the spiral of bones, the ground changed under her boots. Not dirt, teeth. The surface clicked and shifted like enamel underfoot, grinding softly with her steps. The spiral led inward, and she followed. She no longer remembered why. Maybe she never had a choice. In the center of the spiral was a doorway, not made of wood or stone, but of absence, a shape cut into the air itself, darkness that refused to reflect, a vertical slit that pulsed like a closed eye. The fire hadn't opened it. They had, all those years ago in the shaft, with the book, with the words, with the match. "You called it," said her grandfather's voice, calm now. "You never sent it back. It walked, it fed, and it learned your names. Now it remembers." Marjorie turned toward him. Her voice cracked. "Why me?" "Because you're the only one left who was there. Because you're the only one it didn't take. And because you still have your name." She blinked. "What?" "You haven't given it away. Yet." The sky above began to pulse, not with light, with soundless thunder. The world felt inverted, like gravity was pulling upward. From the doorway of nothing, something moved. No form, just thought. Raw, blinding, a pressure against her ribs, her teeth, her memory. It saw her not as a body, as a doorway too, and she understood what it wanted. Not death, not worship, passage. It needed her to remember fully, to complete the pattern she and the others had started decades ago, to finish the summoning, but it also needed her to choose, to give her name, her identity, herself. That was the price. She stepped back. "No," she said aloud, "no more doors." The figures around her tilted their heads, all at once, even her grandfather. The wind died. The bones in the spiral began to rise one by one, floating in the air like ash. And the doorway screamed, not with sound, with absence. The trees bent inward. The sky trembled. Marjorie raised her hands, closed her eyes, and did the only thing left she could think of. She spoke her name, not just aloud, but into the thing, into the void, into the creature. "I am Marjorie Greaves. I remember what we did, and I do not give you anything else." Silence. The spiral bones dropped. The figures around her collapsed into ash. Her grandfather was the last. He smiled, but not with warmth. Then it will find another. He turned to dust, and the doorway closed. Marjorie stood alone in the clearing. The wind returned, but now it was cold. Not fire, not smoke, not sulphur, just cold. She walked back through the forest, back toward Centralia. The footprints were gone. The road was quiet, but the ground beneath still pulsed. Because the thing had not died. It had only been denied, and it would wait. She never told anyone, not the police, not the few journalists who still haunted the edges of Centralia looking for footage of smoke and rot. Not even the old priest in Ashland who used to preach that God sealed the town for a reason. Marjorie Greaves walked back to her cabin, lit a cigarette, and sat in silence for 3 days. Not to think, not to grieve, to listen, because she knew something had changed. Not in the pit, in the world. It started small. Her radio picking up voices from stations that didn't exist, dreams that weren't hers, children in nearby towns drawing circles with teeth in chalk on the sidewalk. Then came the heat, not from coal, not from fire, from beneath thought. Old buildings began to hum at night. People forgot names they'd known their whole lives. Dogs refused to walk past certain street corners. And through it all, the ground beneath Centralia stopped pulsing, only to start again, 87 miles east in a basement in Shamokin. Marjorie tried to fight it. She burned the matchbook. It came back. She dug up the spiral of bones, scattered them in 4 directions. But in her dreams they always returned and perfectly arranged, always spiraling in. She tried to forget again. But forgetting now wasn't forgetting. It was feeding, because the thing didn't live in memory anymore. It lived in denial. One night, she drove to the top of the old hill overlooking Centralia. The fires beneath were quiet, but the air wasn't. She could hear whispering in the trees, familiar voices, voices of people long dead. They weren't threatening. They weren't kind. They were curious, waiting to see what she'd do next. She stood at the edge, holding a single item in her hand, a photo, the original one, from 1994. 3 kids in a mine shaft, smiling in front of a chalk symbol. Ellie, Ryan, and herself. In the photo, behind them, something was watching, something with a hand on her shoulder. She had never seen it before. Not until now. Marjorie dropped the photo into the wind. It caught fire before it touched the ground. That night, she left a note on her door. There are places under this world that remember us. Don't dig, don't listen, don't light the match. No one saw her again. But Centralia still burns, not with fire, with memory, with names whispered in sleep, with old mine tunnels that echo with footsteps, even though they were sealed in concrete decades ago. Every few years, someone disappears there, a teenager, a drifter, a film crew with too much curiosity. Sometimes they find a shoe, a camera, sometimes just a circle of ash where nothing should burn. And somewhere, deep beneath, something waits with open eyes and teeth that never needed a mouth. Because Centralia was never just a town. It was never just a fire. It was a door. And one day, someone will light the match again.